we'll have to do this. But hello, everybody, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to the 2021 Southcoast Food Summit. My name is Narcisse Kunda, and I'm a senior in the Charlton College of Business at UMass Dartmouth, studying management and marketing. And I also have the honor of serving on the UMass Systems Board of Trustee as the student trustee from UMass Dartmouth. Again, I'm so excited to welcome you all to tonight's event. And for me, the topic of food is one that I'm really passionate about because first and foremost, I love to eat, but I also have for many years now served at volunteered at my local food pantry in my hometown of Framingham, and here at UMass Dartmouth, I've served as the manager of our food pantry on campus, and I've also worked closely with local organizations working on issues around food security, such as sharing the harvest farm and others. And so I'm really excited and looking forward to tonight's event. And as we populate the meeting room, we would love for all of you to please type in the chat what city / town you're joining us from. We know a lot of you are joining from somewhere in the South Coast area of Massachusetts, but please let us know where you're joining from in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. I see some people from Fall River, Fairhaven, Providence. Oh, that's awesome. Oh yeah. Oh, this is awesome. All right. And one other thing, as this year's summit is a regular Zoom meeting instead of a webinar, which we've done in previous years, we would like for all of you to please mute yourself when you're not talking, which will be for most of the time. And so please keep yourselves on mute. That way it makes life easier for the rest of us. And yes, we have a great event for you today. First, we'll hear some remarks from Senator Montigny, and following that, Liz Wiley from the Marion Institute will deliver our keynote presentation. Then that will be followed by a panel, and we have some great panelists for you today. And at the following that, there'll be a Q&A session to give you all an opportunity to ask some questions regarding everything that happens today. And yes, now I'll turn it over to Jacob Miller.
Thank you so much, Narcisse, and thank you for continuing to be a leader as student trustee and also as someone who cares so much about this issue. There's so many people on this tonight. I think you all, please, without taking your mics off mute, give yourself a little round of applause for being here. Really happy that you're here spending some time with us to talk about such an important topic to everybody, because we all need food. So my name is Jacob Miller. I am the Senior Policy Advisor and Community Development Director in Senator Mark Montigny's office, and also a 2L at UMass Law. This report and the things that we're going to talk about tonight are super important to me and super important to the region. Not only are we going to learn about the disaster relief and the disaster efforts, as we've learned over the last 18 months, how important food is in getting through COVID and how many folks are food insecure, but we're going to think about the bigger picture and how to ensure that the food system in the region is set up for success. Personally, working for Senator Montigny, who's been a mentor to me for over 10 years now, who's somebody who really cares about his constituents and is ensuring that government can help meet their basic needs. I've personally fielded calls from hundreds of constituents, even delivering some of them food to their house from the partners that we have that I've actually cultivated through the Food Policy Council. So this issue is super important. There are folks every day facing some really tough choices, and I think that our conversation and the panel that will follow will really inspire y'all to take action. Without further ado, I will introduce my boss and mentor, Senator Mark Montigny.
It makes me sound old, and your senior policy advisor makes me sound old. You're too young to be a senior policy advisor, Jacob Miller. I'm very pleased to be here and thankful to Jacob, not only for introducing me so kindly, but for all the great work he does for my office. Also thankful that Narcisse is using his phone, because as you all can tell, I'm using mine, but unlike the great student trustees that just introduced the program and me. I think Narcisse said that his computer has taken the rest of the day off. Well, my technical skills have taken the rest of my life off. So that's why I'm on the phone. And if it looks like a very long selfie welcoming speech, that's what it is. And I will have you know that unlike most shameless politicians, I'm not suggesting I'm not one, but I am absolutely averse to selfies. So this is particularly painful that I am delivering this in this mode, but so be it. A couple of things. First, I want to thank everyone. It looks like we've got a great participation tonight from all over the region. So that's, I'm grateful for. But particularly, I'm thankful that the Marion Institute and UMass Dartmouth and most of the volunteers who have been working tirelessly on this. This isn't just a webinar or a Zoom meeting. This is months and months and months of planning and discussions and meetings about this very, very urgent situation. I want to basically leave you with just a simple message. I can't and shouldn't and won't try to compete with the experts on food security or food insecurity. That's why they're here. And that's why I was given a few minutes for welcome and not a long opportunity for a keynote. This is good for you. But I do have a unique role in this way. I see firsthand the failures of government and the failures of institutions. Coincidentally, I was reading today a review in the Wall Street Journal, not really relevant to this, but other than in the way of looking at the loss of faith in institutions. And we can debate all day long how we've gotten to this point, and we can take the time and, blame former President Trump, and we can blame social media, and there's a whole lot of blame to go around. But ultimately, the systems that serve us under both administrations in Washington, whether it's Republican or Democrat, as well as at many state and local levels, have failed. And anyone who wants to debate that shouldn't really be on the call talking about food insecurity, because it's 2021 and we are rolling in dough at the state, federal, and local level. Now, that is probably a controversial statement for some at those levels. And again, I'm very happy and excited to debate anyone who wants to do that. But in this analysis in the Wall Street Journal, it was a review of a book. At the end of the day, what the public wants is not just the white papers and the think tanks and the expert advice. They want, when they're struggling, to be listened to, and they want the fruits of the programs to serve them well. The fact that we have so many people in 2021, after rolling out trillions of dollars from the federal government, still hungry, still suffering. They were suffering before the pandemic, they suffered more during, and they're suffering post, or will be suffering post-pandemic if we do not discontinue failure. I mean, let's call it what it is. I'm as I get older and serve longer, maybe it's maybe the remedy would be term limits, because I'm less tolerant, I'm less patient, I'm less willing to couch it in BS. It is what it is. The fact that this many people are on this call concerned with food insecurity is a sign that institutions that have spent billions and billions of dollars to make sure that people don't go hungry have failed. And the message that I leave you with tonight, I'm just thinking, as many of you know, I spend a grand amount of my time studying policy, but in some ways, I may spend either equal or greater amounts of time studying markets. I always have. I've been fascinated with markets since I was very young. So I spent a lot of time reading about markets, and I would rather tune in to CNBC during the day than CNN, even though I will enjoy CNN or CNBC or MSNBC in the evening, or variety of other channels. But I watch every day what's going on in the markets and the economy. And all I've heard lately is the whining, the corporate whining about we can't find quality, we can't find workers, so our supply chain is breaking down, and we're paying higher wages, so inflation is a concern. And I won't give an economics lecture tonight. although I feel pretty passionately about this. And the simple answer is that if workers aren't showing up for openings, it's because they're not being paid a fair working wage. And in many cases, of course, you know, because many of you on this call are working 1 or 2 part-time jobs or 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet. And your children in many cases are still hungry. And this food insecurity is directly related to the ability for the average person who works hard to earn a wage where they can feed their family and have a little bit of joy. So I'll close. I'm sorry, it's a rather sobering message, but so is hunger. So I'll close by congratulating everyone, because in a way I'm preaching within the choir. I think I'm part of the choir with you all. But I want to remind you that in the next year or two, when you advocate at the local, state, or federal level, don't let any politician or government bureaucrat tell you we just can't do that. We don't have enough money. We're rolling in dough. I chaired Ways and Means for 4 years. So a kid from New Bedford spending billions. I know exactly every line item in the state budget pretty well, actually. And I can tell you that we have never been in a situation where the federal, state, and then of course, funneling down to the local level is or has been more adequate to feed people. So when you advocate, push back when people suggest that's just something we can't afford. And lastly, and I'm hoping you'll actually out people in the chat, I'm stunned by one thing, but I think it's like an incredible anecdote for this topic. And my sense in reading is it may be more of an anecdote, so I hope you'll help me. Are there actually still any school systems or individuals in Massachusetts that you know of, and if they're in Rhode Island, feel free, that actually still have a policy of shaming people that can't pay for their lunch? Because I've been so stunned by this. And of course, we've worked on regulation and policy and law to reverse it. But I think nothing is more effective. And remember, the right side does this really well. They show up at school board meetings and try to tell school committee people how to teach children. So the left side and the center need to do the same. We need to use social media, and we need to use our advocacy to demand, in this case, food security, but it could be another similar topic. The fact that there has ever been one principal or one staff member or one school system anywhere that would make a kid feel bad because he or she couldn't afford to pay their lunch debt is about the most abusive thing that I've heard in my many, many years in office. And the reason I end with that tonight is because I think it's indicative of a bigger insensitivity in some of our institutions. So I just hope that you will take the time to advocate passionately, but you will specifically use your advocacy, use your protest, use your social media prowess to demand action, because the money is there. That's my message. Many, many years I have delivered this message to some that are on this call when money has been tight, and I still would tell you it's a matter of priorities. If money's tight, don't have $1 billion giveaway to the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, et cetera. So there's always a infinite priorities and finite resources. Well, in this case, although the priorities are still infinite, the resources are abundant. And I hope you'll remember that as you advocate for the next months and years to fix this problem, because it's a problem of immorality, plain and simple. Thank you and good luck tonight.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Montigny, for sharing all these great insights. And yeah, really, thank you for everything you do for us over at the legislature. Now we're going to have Liz Wiley, the Executive Director of the Marion Institute, deliver the keynote presentation for today. Liz, please take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Narcisse. I'm going to get the slideshow up here. Just give me a moment. And let's see, hopefully everybody's seeing this. And we can.
We've got your whole desktop, Liz. just so you know.
Yeah. You know, when you go to it, it's like all these different things start layering on top. So, okay, everybody see us now with our main picture there? Great. All right. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm stunned by the numbers and so pleased. I'd like to thank Senator Montigny and Jacob Miller for all of their support, not just tonight and in preparation for this, but really over the last year and a half. You guys have been firm supporters of the Food Policy Council, and I greatly appreciate that. I'd also like to thank UMass Dartmouth and Chancellor Fuller and Deirdre Healy for collaborating with us tonight on this event and helping us to launch the much anticipated food system assessment report in style. So thank you for that. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Wiley, and I am the Executive Director of the Marion Institute. Our mission at the Marion Institute is to engage individuals and communities in an integrative approach to whole body health. And we do this through our programmatic works, and we focus on promoting health equity, addressing food insecurity, and building resilient communities. I want to just take a moment to highlight some of our program partners in this. Oh, that's better. So the work of the food system assessment report that I'm going to be discussing with you tonight is done through our program, the Southcoast Food Policy Council. It's our newest program to our portfolio. And the mission of the Food Policy Council is to connect, convene, and advocate for local food producers, consumers, and community members who seek policy, food systems that strengthen our regional food system and improved community health and eliminate food insecurity. We joined forces with Stephanie Perks from Coastal Food Shed and Karen Schwabley from CMAP. And we hired the invaluable, the unbelievably talented Holly Fowler, who's on here tonight. And if you can give us a wave, Holly, we'll be bringing you on at some point, I'm sure. Holly is from Northbound Ventures Consulting, and she worked with us to update the food system assessment report that was done in 2014 when it was last done, and to also conduct a food hub feasibility study. The Marion Institute and the Food Policy Council took the lead on the food system assessment report, and you'll have to track down Coastal Food Shed and CMAP for more info on the food hub feasibility study, which is soon to be released. So the Food Policy Council is comprised of over 300 members at large, and we have representatives from all towns along the South Coast, from Wareham to Fall River, and definitely some other towns in other surrounding counties, which we welcome. This past year, we worked really hard. We brought the Food Policy Council into the Marion Institute right at the start of COVID-19. So much of last year was obviously filled with just focusing on emergency food relief. And so a lot of what we've done this past year is built the actual infrastructure and the foundation of the Food Policy Council. And one of the big things that we did is we elected a community advisory board. These are the inaugural members of that community advisory board. We had our first we call it the CAB. We had our first CAB meeting last month, and we're just so grateful to all these partners who have come on to support this work. The CAB's really important, and the food, and as it dovetails to the food system assessment report, because the food system assessment report will become sort of a roadmap for the CAB to use when looking at priorities and the issues for us to address in this region. And we also welcome all of you to use the food system assessment report. I hope that you hear what we have to say tonight, but you'll see that I have so much information to convey. So I'll be talking really fast, and I hope you get all the details. But it doesn't take away from the fact that, reading the report and reading the full report, if you are a stakeholder in the food system, is really important. It's really comprehensive, and it is, there's just so much context to really get the full picture. It is about 140 pages, and we did create a digest, sort of a simplified version. But again, if you are using this in the food system sector for planning purposes, for grant writing, please refer to the full report. So this assessment is designed to build upon the foundational mission of the Southeastern Massachusetts first food system assessment and serve as an active tool for planning, community advocacy, public policy, and decision-making. We started with the objectives there on the left side of updating the original report, adding more data into it by incorporating broader primary research and stakeholder interviews and surveys that weren't a part of the 2014 report. We wanted to share progress made and challenges that are still lingering since the 2014 report. We wanted to identify intervention points where policy can support an equitable and sustainable food system. And we wanted to help raise awareness of what Southeastern Mass contributes to the statewide New England food system work. That fourth point is really important, and it dovetails to the right side of the slide, and how our report contributes and supports the larger statewide work being done. The work seeks to advance state and regional food system planning, namely the New England Food Vision, which calls for the region's 6 states to collectively build the capacity to produce at least 50% of clean, fair, just, and accessible food for all New Englanders by 2060. And the Massachusetts Local Food Action Plan, which is facilitated by the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative. The Food System Collaborative is led by Winston Pitkopf, which we are fortunate enough to have him on our panel tonight. So you'll be hearing more from Winston. This slide is my favorite slide. It was created by Holly at Northbound Ventures. And I love this slide because I think people often get confused about the role of a food policy council. And this slide conveys so much in what it's saying or what it's showing. Our food system is comprised of all of these layers, and while it's very complex and multifaceted, food policy councils must consider all of these interdependent relationships and use a systems thinking approach when addressing change in the food system. In order to create a food system that works for everyone, we need to address policy and decision-making at all these levels, and specifically, we need to understand how culture and value, which is out there on the outside part, influence public policy and should be a reflection of the things we care most about. I like to point out that the benefit of a region having a local food policy council is that the food policy council works in the outer layers, those green and gray areas, and addresses the long-term systemic changes, right? It's able to look further ahead. It's able to look from that systems thinking approach. Whereas a lot of the partners and community stakeholders that we work with and organizations work in that inner blue layer where they're really focused on the direct services and the everyday needs and those to-dos and don't have the advantage sometimes of looking at those long-term systemic changes that need to occur to really make a more equitable food system. The patterns are distinct here as we compare racial composition to other foundational demographic elements such as median household income, educational attainment, poverty. There's a lot of information on this slide and just zone you in a little bit. For the sake of this Food Policy Council, as it reflected the 2014, we incorporated Bristol, Plymouth, and Norfolk counties to be consistent with the data that we collected in 2014. But again, Bristol County, if you zoom in, really shows how specifically New Bedford and Fall River are made, regions with the highest need centers with median household income, half of what the Massachusetts state average is. It's important to note that Bristol County, and we'll be talking about this more in later slides, contributes to billions of dollars to the economic income of the state with some of our top food commodities such as cranberries and oysters and the Port of New Bedford, contributing billions of dollars. But yet we have some of the lowest demographic numbers when it comes to wealth. So, question maybe later for the panelists for us to return to how do we keep some of that wealth here before, for the people that are living here. So tonight I'm going to do a very quick overview so that we have time for our panel, but we're going to be highlighting the different chapters that are represented in the Food System Assessment Report and some of the topics that you see summarized here. So food production and harvest. As we prepared for the summit and we're reviewing slides, Holly, I think, said it best this morning when she said to me, farming is hard. Farming is hard and it remains hard. Some of the key takeaways when looking at commercial agriculture is from 2012 to 2017. We use the USDA Ag Census data that comes out every 5 years. The number of farms in our region decreased by 8.1%, and the amount of land and farms decreased by 8%, outpacing the state in both instances. The average age of farmers continues to rise. It's now 59.8 years of age, and the replacement age of younger farmers is, a fraction of that. The aging farmer population is of real concern, and it shows the need for more succinct support of succession planning. Otherwise, prime farmlands will become vulnerable to development. 40% of farmers are women and 98% are white, which means we still have a lot of work to do to make farming and fishery racially diverse occupations. Cranberries are the power crop of the Southeastern Mass, but we need to pay attention to the fact that other producing states such as Wisconsin and Canada, are starting to really lead that, so that might not be, our prime agricultural crop for much longer. Climate change is, threatens all of our crops and needs to be considered. Farms struggle to be profitable, and farm labor wages and finding skilled farm labor all contribute to challenges already faced by farmers. Land access remains a huge barrier and an issue. I think Holly also said any loss of farmland is too much. This is especially true as we'll continue to become more reliant on our local food systems. We saw this last year, highlighted in many forms, but being able to be resilient on our regional food system is going to become more important. We're going to have more issues with climate change, more natural disasters, more droughts in other parts of the country that are going to impair crops. And then just quickly to touch upon some of the commercial fishing and aquaculture stats. The counties of Bristol, Plymouth, and Norfolk are all home to a combined 18 coastal towns. There were, I want to just highlight a few things. In the 3 counties, landing totals of 571 million pounds of seafood valued at approximately, I think this is billions, isn't this, Holly? Billions. Valued at around 5.7 billion, close to that. The most common species landed within the 3 counties are American lobster, bluefin tuna, the northern quahog, the sea scallop, and across the Commonwealth's commercial fishing industry, the 5 most valuable species are the sea scallops, lobster, oyster, surf clams, and Jonah crab. Food processing and distribution. Food processing, these are critical steps in the food value chain for making sure that foods produced or harvested reaches consumers in a functional format and efficient manner. We've added capacity. I mean, I think the big takeaways here is since 2014, we've added capacity. In September 2018, Meatworks opened, and that's a huge USDA inspected multi-species slaughterhouse that processes cattle, hogs, sheep, and goats in the region. We've also maintained capacity with the Dartmouth Grange Kitchen and Hope in Maine, which is in Warren, Rhode Island. These are primary commercial kitchens and act as food incubators in the region. In 2017, Coastal Food Shed, who I hope is on here, we'll highlight, spun off from Mass in Motion, New Bedford to focus on filling gaps in food access and distribution on the South Coast. They've grown what was, working with being, the farmers markets in New Bedford to really hosting a mobile farm market and now a virtual farmers market that is, accessible by SNAP and HIP. A survey of 43 local producers suggests that Coastal Food Shed could continue to expand its food hub services, offering additional aggregation and transportation options to farmers with the potential to channel more locally grown product to wholesale buyers like restaurants and institutions in our region. Consumer access in where are we here? Wait a minute. Yeah, consumer access consumers access food in a variety of ways, from traditional supermarkets to big box stores, independent grocers and cooperatives, convenience stores, farmers markets. Food pantries and shelters and other community service agencies provide food staples and meal components that are also resources. In the summer of 22, supplemental food providers in the region were serving over 27,000 clients each week. These services are being provided with an average of just 2 or 3 staff members. A survey conducted of Southeastern Mass, this is one of the surveys we conducted last year, surveyed 490 participants. That's an amazing number. We were incredibly lucky to get so much feedback. And I need to acknowledge some of the key partners that made that happen. Specifically, the Immigrants Assistance Center of New Bedford was instrumental. The United Way of Greater New Bedford and the United Way of Greater Fall River and United Neighbors of Fall River, who is on this call tonight, were all really instrumental in getting the word out and letting us hear from important populations that otherwise wouldn't have had their voices heard. And really what came out of that is that there is, a heavy reliance on food pantries as primary food source. 80% rely on grocery stores and big box stores, but that's, you have to take into consideration that many inner city people that live in the inner cities don't have direct access, to grocery stores in their neighborhoods. And the hardest foods to get were meat, seafood, fresh fruits, and vegetables. All right. I want to address the SNAP gap. For those of you that don't know what the SNAP gap is, SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and it has increased over, participation in SNAP has increased over the 3 counties surveyed, but that there's still a SNAP gap of 45%, which basically means that 45% of people that could participate in SNAP benefits are not participating for some reason. And the Healthy Incentives Program, which is known as HIP, participation is even lower. So another area where a lot of education and work needs to be done to increase participation there. This slide also shows those eligible and those participating by an age breakdown. I just want to highlight that we also, down here, I think one of the biggest takeaways that we remember in 2014 is that, looking at what food insecurity looks like for children, and Senator Montigny, is addressing that in his speech. And so still 1 in 8 kids are still food insecure in Bristol County. And among the 3 counties that we surveyed, 1 in 13 kids, that's the average, is 1 in 13 kids, which is still an incredibly shocking number, I think. I want to take a moment to highlight, when we talk about accessibility still being such a big issue, and this was certainly seen last year and continues to be an issue. Some of the work that has been done to address that has been this Southcoast Food Finder and the Southcoast Food Alert System. But I wanted to focus tonight with my partners that are on here, Deirdre Healy, Tim Shea, Paul Constantine, Paul Bourne, Mom, and I think Christine Sullivan is on here too. These people have all been absolutely instrumental in bringing the Food Finder, this tool. It's a web-based application that can help people access food, whether they're looking for a food pantry, a community meal, a farmer's market, a specialty market. It really is inclusive of everyone, and it provides a tool and way to help bridge that gap of food accessibility. And this would not have come to fruition without Deirdre Healy. You get a special shout out because you've been the steadfast cheerleader for this, and the work of all of the Southcoast Food Policy Council members at large really worked hard at bringing this tool to fruition. And we wanted to use tonight as a way to highlight that. So I just thank you to all of you that were so instrumental in this. Food loss and waste. This is kind of, there's like a shiny, we don't have a lot of like high points here, but this one is one of them where we've had some success, some policy success with the state organic waste policy, has impacted food waste and helped contribute to saving 1.5 million tons of food since it was adopted in, I believe it was 2014. Food rescued and or donated increased 30% since then, and food waste collection has more than doubled in the same period of time. In 2022, we expect an expansion of the food waste organics program so that institutions and commercial entities, currently, if they're producing a ton of organic waste a week, they have to have it composted. And in 2022, that should go to food entities that are producing a 1/2 ton. So that will make a substantial impact. There's still a lot of work that can be done here, a lot of educational and outreach. We, through our farmer and survey that we conducted, gleaning is still very nascent in the region, meaning that we could bring some sort of gleaning program to the region to help recover food that is in the fields and not going to be harvested, and then turn that over to food relief programs. Consumer education around labeling, food labeling, is going to be really important. And an increased awareness of protections for those donating food would prevent food waste and help feed those in need. So definite areas for opportunity and growth there. The local food economy is driven by numerous direct and indirect inputs across the food value chain, and Massachusetts Food and Agriculture are accredited with just around 350,000 jobs and 40 billion towards direct economic activity. In Southeastern Mass alone, there are over 11,000 food and beverage stores, food services, drinking places, food manufacturing businesses, and agricultural, forestry, fishing, and hunting entities. And you see some of those stats listed there on the slide. The regions, I want to specifically bring you to, in talking about the total number of food manufacturing businesses, we have 388. This is a, interesting area where we think about how a lot of those entities, and again, we saw this in COVID, are scaled for, international markets. A lot of that food is going out of our region and not staying in our region. So looking at policies and ways to keep some of those products here. Another thing I think that's really important in telling with these slides is that the total number of food services and drinking places is that 7,364. These are, that's a high number. We have a lot of these places, and yet this is consistently an area where food service workers are paid, a low wage. So we have a lot of people working in the food industry, yet not making livable wages. There's clearly work to be done there. Being mindful of the time here, trying to rush through this. As we look at this slide and review some of the topics on the horizon for the Southcoast Food Policy Council, this is the work that we're looking to do and will be doing in the future. But we want to give a shout out to CMAP and Karen, who I think is on here, and the work that they've been doing. They've done a lot of work in this realm, and we're just really lucky to have a buy local organization in the region that's been steadfast in this, and we look forward to working collaboratively with them going forth. Of particular importance are policy interventions that ensure we have both the land and the skilled labor to grow food in Southeastern Mass across the state and across New England, ensure all residents have equal access, physical, economic, diet, and cultural inclusivity to promote health and nutrient-dense food, ensure economic development goals are aligned and actions coordinated so that no one is left behind, and ensure we're doing everything possible to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change on health and the environment. I'm going to summarize here. We are always looking for input. We are always happy to hear from our constituents and our stakeholders. So if you have opportunities, if you see opportunity, if you have ideas, we'd love to hear from you. And I've just put our email on there, which you can reach out to if you have ideas or any suggestions for us now or going forth. I'm going to wrap it there, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Liz. I mean, we have over 100 people on here, and if I don't see 100 clapping remarks for that. I don't know. We should all get down to our reactions and give Liz and Holly and everybody that worked so hard on this a big round of applause, because this is years, a lot of work went into this, and Liz and everyone else has been such a great leader.
Yeah, and Jacob, I just need to give a special shout out to Holly Fowler, who is on here, and she really, she's become my new BFF of Zoom world, and we couldn't have done this without her, and she did an outstanding job on this. And this was a whirlwind just to even give you this kind of information in this quick amount of time. So it is just the top of it. I hope that anybody that's interested in getting this report will have access to it on our website. I think that my teammate, Christine, who's on here, our Food Policy Council Program Manager, probably put the link. If people want, a report, we're happy to send one to you. So yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Fantastic work. So thank you so much, Liz, for the presentation. And I think the panel that we're going to jump into will flow nicely from that. But before I do that, I want to recognize a couple of other elected leaders from our local delegation that have joined us tonight. I see we have Representative Paul Schmidt on the call. So welcome, Representative Schmidt. We have Representative Hendricks also on the call. Welcome to him. And lastly, we have the office of Representative Tony Cabral represented. So we appreciate that. And if I've forgot anybody, please drop it in the chat, but we really appreciate that you're all here with us tonight. So I'm excited. We have an amazing panel to jump into tonight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each panelist just to introduce themselves. I'll call them out by their first name, have them say a little bit about themselves. Then I'm going to ask each in that same order 2 questions. And then from there, if we have some extra time, we'll jump into question and answers and get some folks talking to each other. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Mike Goodman.
Thank you, Jacob. It's a great privilege to be here. I'm Mike Goodman. I have the privilege of serving as the acting provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs here at UMass Dartmouth, and I'm also a professor of public policy.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Next, we have Kristin Sukhis.
Jacob and everybody else, thank you so much for having me today. I cannot contain my excitement, as you can see from my smile. But I'm Kristin Sukhis, and I'm a policy analyst at the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation, Harvard Law School. And my center, along with Community Servings, co-leads Food is Medicine Massachusetts. So I'm also here wearing that hat too, as the program coordinator, or rather coalition coordinator for FIMA.
Thank you, Kristin. Next, we have Winston Pitkopf.
Thanks, Jacob. I'm Winston Pitkopf. I'm director of the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative. I was the project manager for the development of the Massachusetts Local Food Action Plan, and the collaborative works to facilitate implementation of the plan.
Thank you so much, Winston. Next, we have Wendy Garf-Lipp.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Wendy Garf-Lipp, and I'm the executive director of United Neighbors of Fall River. We're a community collaboration agency.
Thank you, Wendy. And last but not least, we have Ivan Britto.
Thank you, Jacob. My name is Ivan Britto. I am the Chief Operating Officer at MO Life and also the coordinator for the MO Life Food Pantry, which is located in downtown New Bedford and been running for 20 years now. And got to that role throughout the pandemic because we needed help. And been playing that role for now, and hopefully we can continue to grow and provide more service to the community.
Thank you so much, Ivan, and thank you to all of you for being here tonight and lending your expertise and knowledge. So I'm going to go to Dr. Goodman first. And the first question I have for you is, how can communities and policymakers make food access and food security possible in light of economic trade-offs and constraints, some that we've talked about tonight?
It's a pretty big question, Jacob. So I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I think when we're talking about food security and access to nutrition, right, I think we need to take a step back and think about what the economy is for. And I'll give a nod to Senator Montigny for highlighting this at the outset. I think there are some basic fundamental things that you have to have in order to have a functioning community, a functioning society, and a functioning economy. And clearly access to food and water and shelter and other basic securities is at the heart of it. So I think it's a false choice to pit access to food and food security against economic imperatives. At the same time, I think there are some realities that we face and that we have to confront directly, and they're highlighted in this assessment quite nicely. On the one hand, right, we have the pressure on the land that we use to grow food, and there are a wide variety of alternative uses for that land, many of which are much more lucrative. If you just think about what's been happening to the regional, statewide, and national housing market in the last few years, over the last couple of generations as well, it's increasingly challenging to make an economic or a financial case to use land in the ways in which we've been discussing it being used and how it's been used for generations here in Southeastern Massachusetts and beyond. And so, you know, we need to make it possible for landowners to see agriculture as a viable economic opportunity. And I think that that's really in part about planning and zoning and certain kinds of incentives. On the other hand, I think one of the tensions you may be highlighting, you know, is at the heart of a lot of the need that we confront in this region, and that's about the very low incomes that we have in many of our communities, and even in some of our more prosperous communities. Food insecurity is a striking problem, and so that begs for a solution that either helps to reduce the cost of accessing nutritional food on the one hand, and on the other hand, efforts that go well beyond these topics of food security to try to help local and regional residents increase their incomes so that they can afford it. And so when markets don't work, we call it market failure in economics. The function of the economy, if you'll forgive the professor getting on his soapbox for a second, is really to allocate resources and distribute, you know, not just money, but goods and services. And when the outcomes of that institution, and an economy is just a series of interconnected institutions, don't yield the necessary results, it's a failure, right? These are human institutions. We don't have to genuflect to the economy. The economy is just a series of human institutions that we use to distribute resources, scarce resources in particular. So then we don't get the result we want, we need to change the rules. And I think efforts to increase incomes to make it easier for people to afford food at market prices are absolutely critical, and efforts to lower the cost of access, particularly to healthy and fresh foods, are important. Along those lines, I think the pandemic revealed a couple of important lessons. And again, I'll call out Senator Montigny for highlighting the disgraceful practice of shaming children for not being able to afford lunch. I mean, in some of our urban communities in this region, school lunches are free for everyone because the relative level of poverty in the community is sufficiently high so that the federal government doesn't require the local school district to prove that any individual child is low income enough to be eligible. We have many of our children in places like New Bedford and Fall River and other urban communities who are eating 3 meals a day at our local public schools. And I think that was something that we took for granted until those children weren't allowed to go to school anymore. When we shut down in the midst of the pandemic. And one real acute problem we faced was the significant loss of access to regular nutritional prepared food. And so I think we need to work on the income side, and I think we do need to work on the access side. And I think if you take a look at that SNAP gap, which was one of the more astounding findings that I think we don't want to get lost here, just like with student free lunch, and it was the case with free and reduced lunch programs, if students are, for whatever reason, not pursuing that benefit, just as families and households may not be pursuing the SNAP benefit, then we need to take a look at other supplemental programs that can help get the support, the income support, either by reducing the cost of food at the point of sale or helping to transfer resources to the areas in need so that they can afford it. So I wouldn't get too caught up in the economics of this. I think we need to look at where the market is failing, and we need to step in and do what we need to do to support healthy choices, our agricultural sector, and the health and well-being of our people and neighbors.
Thank you so much, Mike. You answered my second question, so you're already jumped ahead. so I'll come back to my other questions later if we have time. But for the sake of time, and thank you for that answer. I think you hit the nail right on the head. But for the sake of time, I'll move over to Kristin now. And thank you again for being here. So very broadly, what broad trends have you seen in food policy research?
That's a perfect question, especially after Dr. Goodman, because, in food, I think you said food policy research, but as Dr. Goodman was speaking, my mind was racing with something that Wynton and I were actually talking about later last week, I guess, at this point. And that's really like looking at the root causes here too. Food infrastructure and food policy really goes to, the resource allocation, the infrastructures, the incentive structures that we have. But then also, even if all of those are going well, who has money in their hands? What are the social policies here that we can boost up to? Thinking about the downstream as well as the upstream interventions here that we can think about. So I was just kind of, thinking about the economic policy and how that contributes to food insecurity. But in terms of, food research, there's a lot of these food assessments that are happening, I think, across the state and definitely across the nation. And I think that this is fundamental for any of the work that we're doing in this state. As we've known, we've had them in Everett and in Framingham and in Somerville, in Medford. We have the Massachusetts Local Food Action Plan. And I think that we can all say that having these baseline assessments, having something to hang our hats on as advocates and as trying to gain momentum around the state is critical. Also, I'd say, we have a lot of data savvy legislators right now. And so going with them with hard data to prove your point. And then also thinking about, there are so many things in this particular food system assessment that are just small data points that we can even dive into deeper. There were a couple statistics that really stood out to me. For example, 39% of respondents often or sometimes worry that food would run out before there was money to buy more. That's an appalling statistic. Also, 23% relied on pantries in this region. That's far too many. I mean, more than zero is far too many, but having those that you can take to legislators, that you can take to Food Policy Council meetings, just to remind people of the realities here of what's actually happening. And then, of course, page 122, I'll just call out this, which expenses competed the most with food. We have to think about going back to economic policy. What are the other stressors here? We have rent, we have utilities, we have internet, we also have healthcare. All of these things impact food access, impact food insecurity in our resource allocation. So it's never just about food. And I think this report does a fantastic job of highlighting that too.
Awesome, Kristin, thank you. And you have a lot of experience in food policy councils and thinking about coalitions around these issues. How should food policy councils evaluate strategic options, and how do we know which decisions are good?
This is a great question, and it totally depends on the council, and it totally depends on the coalition. Things to think about are, of course, feasibility and impact, and then you can unpack those two ideas even further and further. In terms of feasibility, even looking at what's realistic. How big of a piece can you bite off of? Can you want to think about piecemeal wins? You want to think about smaller wins, and also how you get there. Thinking about folks that are in your coalition, that are in your council, who are their relationships with? What type of experts are sitting at the table, and who do you need to reach out to? What do those partnerships look like? And then, of course, how much is your effort worth? What happens on the other side? Are you going to have a multi-year effort for something that might not have the biggest impact? And so that's where these assessments and these reports are really critical too, to lay out the gaps. I think Holly mentioned in the chat that this has been a massive data gathering and analysis process. And the next step now is to think about priorities. And that has to do with what's feasible, what the impact is, also what the priorities are of the individual council members too. Where is the energy? So I think it's just the beginning, and I have a lot more to say about that and how to move forward with that strategy. But it's a sense of it's a catalyst basically for action.
Fantastic, Kristen. Thank you so much. And we're going to move now to Wynton. And he did some many stakeholder listening sessions to gather information. Just curious if you could talk about what were the key learnings you took away from those sessions.
Yeah, so this was a process the collaborative did last summer, realizing two things. One, that it was 5 years since the state's food plan had been published, and a lot had happened since then, and that a lot was happening last year, some of you may remember. And so it was an opportunity to bring people together virtually to talk about what they were dealing with as a result of COVID, and also where we'd come, how far we'd come since the food plan was done. And what we really learned in the conversations was that not a lot had changed. Maybe some priorities had been lifted up differently. Maybe there were some details that had emerged that were maybe more urgent than they were 5 years ago. But that essentially the core of the problem continues to be disinvestment in the food system and trust of the market essentially to manage the food system in a fair way, so that everyone gets fed and that the producers are treated fairly. And so the way that plays out in Massachusetts is that farmers have a really hard time breaking even. The average farmer in Massachusetts earns 96 cents for every dollar they spend on production. And I'm not a business person, but I know that that's not a good number. And so, and the professor's nodding, so that means I got that right. And then so recognizing that the issue in the balance around hunger is not that food is too expensive. Food is actually less expensive right now in America than anywhere else in the world as a percent of disposable income than ever at any time. And so how do we balance that incredible disparity that farmers aren't making enough money to grow food for us and people can't afford to buy food? And so that what was lifted up in the discussions was things that are really at the core of that imbalance: the lack of access to affordable land, lack of access to education. There's been remarkable disinvestment in UMass Extension over the last 30 years, to the point where farmers can't count on that as a resource anymore for objective science, for management practices. A lack of access to the levers of power, to the rooms where the decisions are made about what's going to happen and how the local food system is going to work. A lack of coordination overall. State agencies aren't talking to each other. And so, that's something we've worked on. And I think we have made some progress on with the establishment of the Legislative Food System Caucus and some other steps like that. But still, you have agencies that don't communicate well with each other, which meant that at the beginning of COVID, there was this tremendous struggle to understand how to best connect where the food was to where the food needed to be, because those things are handled by very different agencies. And then finally, the thing that really, one of the through lines that wove through all of the conversations was about equity, and about the fact that the food system isn't working for a lot of people, but it's especially not working for people of color. And that any lack of access that I just talked about, whether it's land, jobs, education, power, that's increased tenfold to communities of color. And there needs to be targeted action to make sure that we're taking steps to really undo those inequities.
Thank you, Wynton. And I want to zoom in on something you said and relating to my next question, the idea of levers of power and how folks in these systems can access these levers of power. And it's more specifically, how food policy councils at a local level could access and really pull on these levers of power. And then to also think about, and if you could answer this with the same question, what are some impacts food policy councils have made at a state and regional level kind of going to some of Kristin's comments about them being catalysts and really being great conveners of the folks working on these issues.
Yeah, I think, as I was saying, the food system is based on efficiencies, and that means scale, and that means industrialized production, it means federalized policies. And what food policy councils really allow for is building local power, because once you've aggregated control in the big industrial food system and the federalized policies, that works for an average area of the country, and there is no average area of the country. Every area is unique. And so whether it's a state food policy council that's addressing particular challenges that are relevant to the state, or a local one, a local council that are addressing things at an even more micro level, there's no one better that can understand the challenges as well as the assets that are there to try to make sure people are fed and make sure that people who are producing food are treated fairly. And so we see this on, we've got a couple dozen local food policy councils around the state. What I think is particularly neat about food policy councils is that it's more of an art than a science. There's no single formula or structure that works for all of them, and each one does things differently. And the collaborative runs a network of local councils. And it's fascinating to be part of those conversations and hearing folks talk about just vastly different things. Some that really do focus on policy and are really interested in engaging and mixing it up with their municipal leaders. And some that are really much more focused on service provision. But what they're all doing is they're connecting parts of the food system that haven't been connected for a long time. Again, the people that are producing food, and the people that are processing and distributing food, and the people that are helping to distribute food, particularly to people who have limited access. The challenge is then, how does that translate up? Because you're talking about, let's say, community gardens or urban agriculture, and that's awesome work. It has so much value when it comes to education, when it comes to filling some of the gaps about nutritious food being available, when it comes to community building and protecting local land, urban land and things like that. But as one of the big community garden advocates on one of these councils said, we're not going to community garden our way out of hunger. And that this stuff needs to be figured out, how to be brought to scale. Remember what I said at the beginning of this answer is that scale is the problem, right? Is that when you bring things to scale because you're thinking about efficiency, you start to lose that ability to serve what people really need in their communities. And so you've got to find that balance. And I think food policy councils are having those discussions, and in some cases have started to find those balances.
Fantastic, and thank you. And the next two folks that we're going to be hearing from both really do unbelievable work leading on food access here in the region. And I'm going to ask both of you the same question about your experience over the last 18 months, and especially how it relates back to this assessment. Because I know you've been doing the work every day and working with folks that are in need. So first, I'd like to go to Wendy Garf-Lipp, if you'd be willing to first talk a little bit about what you do, what your organization does, and what your experience has been over the last 18 months.
Thanks, Jacob. I'd love to. United Neighbors initially was not an organization that dealt with food. It wasn't part of our mandate at all, and it wasn't in our mission statement. However, one of the things that was in our mission statement was responding to emerging issues. And prior to the pandemic, it became very clear that the food pantry system was not a system that can support families. Prior to the pandemic, you could only go to a food pantry once every 30 days because they were all interconnected by computer. And when you ran out of food before the 30 days, you just had to wait without food. So United Neighbors stepped in and we created an emergency food cupboard where people could come and get non-perishable food for a couple of days. When we first opened it up about 6 years ago, we'd get 2 or 3 families a week. The month prior to the pandemic, we were seeing 30 to 40 people every single week prior to the pandemic, that people could not make ends meet on what they were being given. I want to take a minute to just respond to something that's been said. We talk about our kids are getting breakfast and lunch and often dinner in school, let's call a spade a spade. They are not getting filling, nutritious meals to keep them alive. Those are supplemental meals that we give them. That is not the kind of meal that we expect a child to have. And be aware that school is only in session Monday through Friday. What happens on the weekends? What happens on a snow day? What happens during holidays? For us to think that school lunches, breakfasts, and dinners are a solution is a little naive. It's a nice thing we provide, the same way we got a snack of milk and cookies when we were in school. But it does not fulfill the nutritional needs or the empty belly needs of the people that I am dealing with. So during the pandemic, when the pandemic came about, initially United Neighbors, my organization, and United Way got together and we called for a community meeting to create the United We Help Fall River. And we brought together 95 different agencies, and we met every Tuesday via Zoom, and we still meet now every other Tuesday via Zoom to deal with community issues. Our first issue, obviously, was food access. And because of the support that we were able to garnish from all the agencies that sat at the table, we had incredible outcomes. From the beginning of April through the end of August, we were able to provide a full week's worth of food, prepared food and groceries to families that were triaged for their need based on quarantine, based on access to food pantries, based on who was living in the house. Each family got 2 large steamer trays of food that were prepared by 9 different restaurants that we paid through the money that we raised in Fall River. They also got a USDA produce box. They got soup or macaroni and cheese through Blount's, and they got gold medal bread. And we had 37 agencies, 500 bag lunches went out, 8,000 different families were connected, 65,000 meals were distributed. We had 769 volunteer shifts in order to make this happen. And then it stopped because the $500,000 we raised ran out. And those people are still hungry. It was great that we were able to do that, but we cannot have a system that is based on us responding to emergency needs. We have to have a system that works all the time, regardless of what's happening in the world. We are so totally dependent in the food support distribution on the Greater Boston Food Bank. We all go to the same place. If anything ever happened there, the food would fall apart. And because we are dependent on something that is an hour and a half away, we need refrigerated trucks, we need drivers, yet we have all this food being prepared right here in our backyard. And that food doesn't get into our families or even into our institutions. So it is a very worrisome thing for me that we keep on wanting to strengthen the existing system rather than sit down and think about how we can create a better system with what we have right around us that will support farmers and support the families that I'm working with. I have one family that would come to the food pantry, to the food cupboard almost every week. It was a husband and a wife and 4 children, and they were clearly very, very embarrassed to be there. And it's an uncomfortable thing when people are coming and asking for your help and you're standing there and handing them cans of corn. And the father said to me, I know we come a lot, but I want you to know that my wife eats dinner Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I eat dinner on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. This is America. This is the 21st century. How is it possible that people that are our neighbors are not eating dinner so they can support their children and provide food for their children? We need to look at what we are doing and find a way to make it local, supporting people that we have right here around us, and take away the stigma of having to get food, having to line up at a food pantry, having to say how many people you're providing food for, being told, no, you can only take 2 cans of corn. What do we think? They're standing on the corner and selling the corn? That we're not going to give them another can of corn? It is unbelievable the way we look at this. And we have to have a whole new way of looking. We provide so many things for our residents. We provide parks for them, and we provide recreational activities, and we provide education. And in the same way we do that, we need to provide food, and we need to provide food that is healthy and nutritious, which brings us to the next point. I can give my families fresh fruits and vegetables. They don't have a clue what to do with them, nor very often do they have a stove or an oven. Very often they have a hot plate or a microwave. They don't have the facility to take that produce box, that 40-pound produce box that we handed out during the pandemic. Lots spoiled because they don't have full-size refrigerators. They're sharing refrigerators with multiple people that are living in their homes. We also have done a really good job in telling people that the only way you can be healthy is with fresh fruit and vegetables. So they don't buy frozen fruits and vegetables. So they don't buy any fruits and vegetables, because if you can't afford the fresh ones, why bother? We have to find a happy medium so that we can help people understand that there are a variety of different things that are available and financially available to them for us to be able to go forward. I have one mantra: feed the folks, save the world. If everybody ate, if people didn't have to worry where their next meal was coming from, we'd have so much more time to deal with all the other problems we're encountering. Thank you.
Fantastic, Wendy. Thank you so much. And I think that that needs to be, I'm writing the mantra down because I think that needs to be all of our mantra: feed the folks, save the world. That's amazing. Thank you for your remarks. Ivan, I posed the same question to you about your experience over the last 18 months. What lessons have you learned? What message would you like to get out to folks?
Well, first, I'd like to thank Wendy. Well said, very well said. I totally agree with everything you said, as well as the other panelists. I think everybody's saying the things that need to be said. But for us, for our experience, when the pandemic hit, it was difficult because we didn't think that we were going to be open. So we decided within the next week after the nation shut down that we needed to be open for our community. And so we, with a couple of people, with 2 other volunteers, we started opening every other week for a couple of months. And then I believe in May, we started opening every week, and we've been doing that ever since. So, and the numbers were there, and the need, right off the bat, elders in our community, people that are on fixed income, they don't have the extra money to buy food. So we see a lot of elders at, excuse me, at our pantry, a lot of minorities, the Hispanic community, Cape Verdean community, all the people that make New Bedford who they are, who we are. And we see that a lot on a weekly basis. And families with children coming through our doors, even though the pandemic was happening, people put their mask on and came to get the food because they needed it. And at the time where it was scary to be outside and be around other people, we saw the need, and we saw that the people would be there every single week or every other week initially. And no matter if it was rain or snow, they were there. So the need is definitely there, and it's continuing to happen, where we have a line outside our door an hour before we open, because they want to get in and get their food and leave. And that line will stay there throughout the winter. Like I said, if it's 20 degrees or 60 degrees, our line is there. And some weeks it's more than others. But being from New Bedford and growing up in New Bedford, what some of the things that's already been said, what jumps off to me right away is education, in terms of educating our community, the importance of learning how to grow your own food. And I think when you start local, and from what Wynton said, you start local in teaching, I think you teach people that the importance of growing your own food wherever you can and however you can. But at the same time, from a regional level, to what Wendy said, we need to keep the food that's growing in our area, as opposed to growing it here, sending it away, and then trying to bring it back. We need to have local resources sustain our community. And for me personally, I try to buy the best quality food that I can. And I have some, I'm blessed to have the resources to go to the store and buy some quality fruits and vegetables. Every day I leave there and I'm like, how can anybody afford this? This is crazy. You buy 2 bags of food, or you buy some vegetables and fruits, and you're paying an arm and a leg. So to think that some of our people in a lower income community, especially the color, the African American community and and Latinos and Cape Verdeans, there's no way that the wages that they're making, they're going to afford some of this food. It's just not going to happen. And so to me, that makes me sad because I see my community can't afford quality food. It's not even close. So they go and buy whatever they can and probably not even look at some of the food that's going to be healthier for them. So I think education starting with our school and something that, this South Coast Food Policy Council can hopefully we could work on is how do we provide education to our inner city so that people will know the importance of healthy food and also start to grow your own food. I believe if you can grow some of your own food, I think that's empowering. It's powerful that you can sustain yourself in some level, even if it's just knowing how to farm. But then at the same time, if you have the resources, you can go and grow as much as you can. And that's, for me personally, that's something that I'm learning more, is how do I grow some of my own food? But as a regional, it goes down to how do we drive the policies to make the changes at the state level so that we have, more farms in our local area, and that food can stay local, and we can find a way to make that more affordable for the people. But it's all about the policies. And again, you have to be able to make it affordable for the community. So that's some of my personal experience as far as the food pantry. And we give a lot of fruits and vegetables, but at the same time, when the season is not there, the fruits and vegetables who are a little more healthier, that's not there for the people that we were serving. So then we just go to meats and frozen meat and canned goods. And for me, that hurts because I want to be able to, I try to eat healthy. So I'm serving the people at our pantry some food that may not be as healthy as I would like it to be. And give them that option, not only meat, but cans, but give them fruits and vegetables and other stuff that may be a healthier choice. So, but we don't have that option year round because we don't have the resources. And the local YMCA does a great job providing some food for us during the season. And then the Boston Food Bank, we order fruits and vegetables, produce from them, what they have year round. But again, that number the quantity of that goes up and down. So it's tough because you have people who want some of the produce, but we don't have enough for them. And so those are things that I think we have to do. But it's driving a food revolution that I think we need to do as a society to be more control of our food, because I think there's war on farming, and there's a war on people being able to produce their own food. And I think if we don't get serious about that and having control of the food that we can grow and eat, especially in a local area and locally, we're going to lose some of that ability to have our own food. And it's not good, because if you're dependent on your food to come from a long distance, like Wendy said, when the pandemic hit, you can tell how much, we're dependent on the Boston Food Bank. If they don't have food for us, we have nothing for the community. So that we're one truck away from not having food for the people. And that's frozen food or produce. And actually, when the truck from the United Way, who does a great job providing food for us with the deliveries, when their truck goes down, we're scrambling because our pipeline is cut right there. So that's how quick and how easy it is for our community not to have food for them on a weekly basis. So it's really, my hope is that we can really drive the policies that will make a change so that we have we can feed ourselves locally for the most part as a community, and especially the inner city, because we are disproportionately disadvantaged at this point.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Before I pass it to Narcisse, please give the whole panel a round of applause. Narcisse is going to do probably have time for one or two questions. So please, if you put them in the chat or use the raised hand feature, Narcisse will take care of that. It sounds like we have all the people and the mantra to continue this revolution and this movement. So, going back to Wendy's mantra, feed the folks, save the world. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap this panel. And I just really thank you all and thank everybody here for the time you spent with us, and look forward to hearing the questions and answers in the chat.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Now as we transition to the Q&A, if you have a question and would like to address it to a specific panelist, please feel free to type that in the chat, or you can raise your hand and you can unmute and speak. And Yes. Questions? Any questions? No. Let me see. Okay, I think there's a question in the chat by Carrie saying, how do fundraising effort at places like Shaw's help or hinder our efforts? And I think we can have Lise answer this, or you can pass it on to any other panelists.
I'd like to answer this. Okay.
Yeah, please go
Yeah.
ahead. Wendy.
So as I said, we have the emergency food cupboard, and we ask people not to donate food. We ask them to donate money, because when you donate food, you open your cabinet and you take out the can of coconut milk that you bought 3 months ago because you were going to make curry and you never did, and you donate that, or you donate olive stuffed with, you know, blue cheese or something like that. People don't donate 50-pound bags of rice. People don't donate healthy food. So when people donate things at Shores and they bring me 500 cans, they feel like, wow, we're feeding a lot of people. But so much of that food just hangs out in my cupboard because people are not interested in tomato paste. That's not going to feed them. But if I get money, then I can buy the food that people really are going to eat and really, really need.
All right, thank you very much, Wendy.
So can I speak to some of the?
Yes, please go ahead.
So my name is Adele Sands. I'm the superintendent of Bristol County Agricultural High School. And so I actually am speaking to this from an agricultural perspective, but also from a public school perspective, because I am the superintendent of a public school. So first, I want everybody to know that public schools are required right now to provide students with free meals. We provide a free breakfast, we provide a free lunch, and if they want, and many kids don't want to carry food home for their entire family in their backpack, but we do provide whatever they want. But from an agricultural school perspective, we are a school that we have a dairy farm, we have beef, we have pork, we have chickens, and our students are fed with what we have on our farm. And one of the issues, if people really want to work on something that would dynamically change education, we have been sitting on 1,000 pounds of beef and chicken during COVID, and we've been giving it out to food pantries, but we cannot give it to other schools, which is what we've been trying to do, because public schools don't have people on staff that can handle raw meat. Our school we have cooks who are cooks, and they can handle raw meat, but public schools get their food. And as much as I love Michelle Obama, I cannot serve my milk to my students because our milk processed is whole milk, and I can't give whole milk to my students. So our kids work on a dairy farm, but they can't even have whole milk, which we know is actually better for them than the milk that we get delivered. The other issue for schools right now is public schools are not getting food. The system, we are not getting food. The supply chain is broken. And actually 2 weeks ago, we had to hijack, and I mean, I had foremen from our school go out and hijack a truck because they wouldn't deliver to our school because they didn't have enough people to deliver to all the public schools around. So the public schools right now are suffering because there isn't enough food to actually give to our kids. Now that's only one side, that's only one piece of this. So I wanted to speak to the public school piece, but also the agricultural school. But I also wanted to speak to what Ivan was talking about. And this is a real issue for us because I have 4 cities and 16 towns that send to my school. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is that if we don't get BIPOC kids, not adults, but kids invested in environmental science, in agricultural science, in natural resource management, we're doomed. Because even I look at everybody on this, and it's a lot of white people doing this right now, and we need BIPOC kids invested in this. And that's something I think we need to work on absolutely with all of our hearts, is getting BIPOC kids invested in this work.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you so much, Adele. Is that all? Sorry. All right, good. Thank you very much. We have time for one more question. I apologize, we can't get through all of them, unfortunately, but I think we'll take one last question from Ben Jones. I think you had your hand up, and that'll be our last question for today. Please, Ben, you can feel free to unmute and go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I really didn't want to follow Superintendent Sands, but so I lowered my hand. But yeah, I mean, my question seems, pretty local and small compared to like all the systems conversations we're having. It's so great to see so many inspiring folks doing inspiring things here. But my question, one thing that stuck out to me when Liz was going over the report is that, we are the largest cache fishing port in the nation. And I mean, some of this is also, education and, all that stuff. But man, it kills me as a kid who grew up eating probably way too much cheese and whole milk in Wisconsin Dairyland growing up. We got our dairy products in Wisconsin into the schools, out into the community. Are there any efforts to try to get more, systematic integration with our fishing community and the food deserts in cities throughout the region?
Can any of the panelists take this question?
So I can't speak, Narcisse, to what the local school districts are doing, but I would highlight, I think, another striking finding from the assessment, and that is that a very significant portion of the regional catch, including at the Port of New Bedford, is exported. We talk a lot about the high value products like the $18 to $20 a pound scallops that, if you can afford them, are delicious and are in great demand across the region and the nation. But a lot of the underutilized species, as their term of art, that are harvested are sold because they haven't really been marketed effectively or utilized effectively. And oftentimes they are much lower cost. If they can be sold locally, they can still return, I think, a reasonable profit to the harvester or the fisherman. And I recall being involved in a conversation a number of years ago about this, in which, one of the fishing stakeholders in the local area referred to them as garbage fish, and that nobody wants garbage fish. And I remember thinking, sort of snippily, well, you might come up with a better name, because those are species that end up on the plates of people around the world who pay for them out of their disposable income. So I think more intentional utilization of the local species, including trying to really work hard to market the local catch, the less obvious components of the local catch, getting them into the schools seems like a no-brainer, but getting them out into the groceries and the supermarkets and even in the food pantries I think would be important. To Wendy's point earlier, though, people need to know what to do with those fish, and so there may need to be some intermediate processing at an early stage so that it can be converted into a food product that's easy to prepare and to eat. But I think there's opportunities to help support the local fishing industry by domestically marketing some of the fish species that are currently being exported, many of which we've never heard of or had on our plate.
All right. Thank you very much, Provost Goodman. And as we finish, we're coming up on time right now. I do want to thank all our panelists today. I want to thank Liz Wiley for the presentation, and also all our panelists for such a great conversation and discussion. As Liz mentioned, this assessment and also just today's event is meant to be a conversation starter. And we hope that it can be used in schools, in communities, and in organizations to hopefully start these discussions about how we improve our food system so that we can create a more effective system that works for everyone and addresses all the inequities that our communities, and particularly communities of colors, are facing. And I also, as we finish, I want to thank the Marion Institute and UMass Dartmouth and the Office of Senator Mark Montigny for putting together tonight's event. And I also want to thank all of you for tuning in. We had over 100 people on the call today from all over the Southcoast, from Rhode Island, and I think we even had someone from Vermont. So this is awesome. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. And there'll be a follow-up email with the recording and also some information about the panelists and contact information. So that way you can follow up with people if you have any further questions or would like to continue this discussion. Yeah, so that's really it. So thank you everybody again for tuning in. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And
thank you, Narcisse.